And to be clear, Brexit is an English phenomenon, not a British phenomenon. So, Wales did vote for leave, but Scotland and Northern Ireland did not. This is an English phenomenon. The English is like a sort of a party of very dysfunctional family with the wrong members in control, and it feels that way. So. So Corbyn's got his own difficulties here. I mean, at the end of the day, he's just intellectually not very bright, really. Look him up. He's just not the sharpest tool in the box. He's Uncle Jeremy. He's a figurehead. The difficulties which he's found himself into with his own anti-Semitism crisis are acute, and that's a function of his lack of. He's just not a very clever man. Now,
yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, he's been getting a lot of kind of, at least based on somewhat I believe of his support of a freer Palestine and other things. Like, he's been really kind of hit hard over this anti-Semitism situation, which you kind of see they're trying to do. I don't know if you're familiar here in the U.S. with Ilhan Omar, who's been the subject of a lot of kind of, in my opinion, not too just criticism of that. So, but what I've been wondering, I mean, I do kind of get what you're saying, like not the smartest tool in the shed kind of, because it is. I mean, I do admire like what he stands for to a large degree, because I'm a supporter of Bernie Sanders here, and I do understand that Jeremy Corbyn is a little bit left, is a good deal left of Bernie Sanders, but yeah, I mean, I really think it would be tough because there's been a lot of like the right wing kind of press in Britain, and not just like the Daily Mail, but like other organizations have been pushing that for a long time. And even people in his own party who hate him very much.
Yeah, I mean, but Bernie Sanders is a very accomplished politician, and in his version of socialism is pretty much centrist from a European perspective.
Yes.
The difficulty in America is that people hear socialism and think communism. They're very different. They're very different things. No, the real problem with Jeremy Corbyn is his deputy, John McDonnell, who is a much cleverer man. Now, he's really smart, and he's but like Jeremy, he's a Marxist. So they're looking for something that is really quite profound. And frankly, who's to say that that's not right? I mean, I'm not sitting here thinking, oh, capitalism's great. Look, I don't want any of your nasty hardcore socialism. Like, you know what? Given the difficulties we've got in our country and our society, I might think, well, actually, bring it on. I'd welcome it. How can it be worse?
Yeah.
The difficulty is, I want to be able to vote for that, and I want my vote to be measured and counted. There has to be a representational democracy. That's the issue here. It can't be done by stealth. And the opportunity for Brexit is that disaster capitalists and disaster Marxists are looking to smash it up in order to remake everything in their own image. That's the tragedy, and that's where people's livelihoods will be destroyed and lives will be lost.
Yeah, I really think it's interesting because a lot of people in England obviously support socialism and socialist ideas kind of like way more. But then again, there is just as in America, there is that small portion, probably smaller in the UK than in the US, that like really want to fight against a broad like societal kind of change that Corbyn is pushing for, and they're going to go, I think, really go all out to do it. And I think it does make sense that they're
the changes that he proposes, if he wins an election fair and square and they're in the manifesto and everything else, then people can look at see what he's proposing and then go for it. But what he's looking for is revolution, brothers and sisters. And that's why I think he's facilitated this Brexit as far as he can, because there's a long way to go yet. I mean, we're still 10 days out. Who knows how it'll end up? But at its worst, we will leave without a deal, at which point, it's like voting to have economic sanctions applied on yourself.
Yeah, it just seems, I've heard some descriptions of it, like with like all the ships backed up and stuff like that, just seems quite awful, yeah.
Oh, it would be intolerable. Let me put it to you another way. I've already started stockpiling stuff in my house to feed my family, because 75% of our food comes through the channel ports, and because the government has said they'll prioritise medicine over food, I'm thinking, am I going to get coffee?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to, so I've literally been ordering sackloads of stuff, and you feel like an absolute idiot to do so. But it's just like
Who
that's the
knows?
level of
Yeah.
insanity that we're facing. It's like the whole country's having a collective nervous breakdown.
Yeah, that does kind of bring us to this week, though, because it has been, even by the last 3 years here in England, it has been a pretty crazy week. But we do know is, at least on the EU, we will not be leaving the EU, or you guys won't be leaving the EU on March 29th, as according to Sky here. The Prime Minister promised 100 times that they would be, but no, this week's developments, in the absence of a deal, it's clear there will be a majority in Parliament to prevent us leaving, or you leaving on March 29th.
That's only true to an extent, because it's no longer in our gift. We will be leaving on the 29th unless the EU collectively and unanimously agree to an extension.
Oh, it's now, so they're saying there will be so Parliament passed the thing this week that say there's going to be, we can't do no deal, but now it has to go to the EU to extend Article 50 until they're able to figure that out, and they have to vote for it unanimously.
Yeah, 3 key votes here. Well, the fourth actually was lost, but no, the key votes are Theresa May's withdrawal agreement was voted down on the second occasion. The MPs then voted by sizable margin for there to be no deal. That's advisory. It's not. Has no place in law. That's not within our gift. The only way there can be no deal without any further third-party involvement is that we rescind Article 50. That's entirely within our gift. We could do that tomorrow in a heartbeat. One letter, one email, job done.
And that would kill everything.
That would kill everything. Everything just resets. That's within our gift. But the request then the third bill was to request an extension from the EU. Right? That's not in our gift. The EU has to decide that. The fourth vote, which the government did win, and only by 2 votes, was that Parliament should now set the timetable for the courses of action as to what bills would be placed in front of the House. Now, at the moment, the Speaker, John Bercow, order, has a lot of power as to which amendments to select on bills, but he can't actually run the legislative programme because he's not a member of the government. The government does that. Anyway, there was a bill that was asking that Parliament, effectively, it would sack Theresa May. That failed, but only by 2 votes. So where we are now is the EU have to decide if they're going to give us more time. Now, Theresa May is going to bring back her bill for a third time. I mean, this is unprecedented. You're not, but under parliamentary rules, allowed to represent the same bill in the same session of Parliament without there being substantive changes. Now, there was between 1 and 2-ish, insofar as the Attorney General, Geoffrey Cox, got an additional piece of documentation which didn't change the withdrawal bill, but it clarified a couple of points. But her third reading of this bill, it will be identical. So that's unprecedented. Now, if that does not pass, and we assume that it will not, then the EU will have to say to Theresa May, well, what do you want this extra time for? What are you going to do with it?
Yeah, and the question is, will she have kind of a good answer for that?
Well,
and probably not.
No, she will not. What,
yeah.
The best outcome in this situation, and I think that Theresa May is using it as a way of trying to frighten her far-right ERG friends, is to say that she would then effectively have to request a 2-year extension. The key date here is the European elections, which take place in May, I think. Now, if our extension can't go past those elections, because we will still then be a member of the EU, so therefore we have to take part in the EU elections. We do have European members of Parliament, MEPs. All countries do. They sit in Strasbourg. It's the European Parliament. So it's a democratic organisation. So what may happen, and Donald Tusk is certainly for this, well, there's 2 choices. You can either have a very short technical extension, which the EU could grant, if they thought that if Theresa May was basically saying, I just need more time to prepare for no deal and so do you, because that's what's going to happen here. But given that the House haven't asked for that, that would seem to be acting in bad faith. Or she says, right, okay, I want a 2-year extension. will take part in the European elections, and basically we'll go right back to the beginning of triggering Article 50 all over again. Now, if that happens, that would allow for another general election. It would allow for a new Tory leader. It would allow for Parliament to then start a whole series of indicative votes as to what kind of Brexit we really do want here. Even a people's vote, which takes, let's say, 6 months to organise. It's a really substantial piece of legislation to get through the House on for a referendum, particularly a referendum which in this instance might be needed to be binding as opposed to advisory. So huge amount of legislation.
And the tough thing for Theresa May is she's going to have to do that even after. By the way, and she is really here rewriting the rules on prime ministerial accountability, and no one really thought that she could be around because the way it works is, and many people in the United States would be like, "What?" But they would be very surprised to learn this. But if many people thought after she lost 2 votes by substantial margins in England, that she would be kind of kicked out and forced to resign. Which is something that not many people in the United States would expect, because most people think, like the prime minister, like the president, and the president serves 4 years of a term, no matter what. But in the UK, I think the way it works is there an election that's going to be held, or would she just normally resign, or just step on? That's kind of the customary thing. Is she just resigns if there's like a big vote like that, right?
Well, your use of the word customary is telling. Yes, everything is customary. We have no constitution, so it's not like in the US where we have a president. A prime minister can sit for as long as their party wants them to sit if they are the leading party in power. They could be there for 50, 60 years, whatever. No, the thing with Theresa May is that because it's such a poison chalice now. There are plenty of people who'd want her job, but Tory party rules are that there was a leadership challenge a few months ago, which she won. And even though she's useless, people would prefer someone else, but it was such a delicate matter. She's like a sort of a zombie flag catcher, You put her up in front and... no one wants to, at least in the Tory party, wants to put in that awful position there. Absolutely. So there's no way they can get rid of her at this critical juncture if there is, if she loses the next week's third vote, and if she requests a substantial 2-year extension, and if that is granted, at that point, although she can't actually be forced out by the Tory party, because Tory party rules is she was. It can only take place once a year, right? So she could if she wanted to. And remember, this is a real suspicion here that she's on some kind of spectrum. Is Theresa May? Asperger's is suspected by many wise commentators. You look at the behaviour; it's pretty clear. So it's entirely possible she may just say, "I'm just going to stay on. You can't get rid of me," and just carry on, even though she's one of the worst prime ministers we've had for many a long year.
And she probably won't want to make the mistake of calling for another general election, because then she would almost certainly lose, and then Corbyn would get his chance about leaving. Correct, right?
He would have a chance, but there's by no means certain. I mean, the Tory party are still way ahead in the polls. This is the comedy because Corbyn is such a divisive figure. Since the independent group split off, which the reason why the independent group split off, it was a chucker and decided that he didn't want Corbyn to be prime minister. He was had enough of this man. So that's what the independent group is about. That's about making certain that
Corbyn is not.
That Corbyn will never be prime minister, because basically they're going to sort of soak off enough of the kind of moderate Labour vote to make sure that Corbyn will never win enough seats.
And just splinter their power, and because I'm assuming that independent group always has is probably made up of people with pretty safe seats.
No, not necessarily, but they do. They are a centrist party, like the Liberal Democratic Party, and so they will take votes away from Labour. And because it's a first past the post system, if you have, like, say, a seat and there are 10,000 people in it, and 4,000 people vote Tory, and normally 6,000 people would vote Labour. Let's just say, in this instance, you might think, well, 3,000 people would vote Labour and 3,000 people would vote for the independent group.